This is a Brawl Network production.
Tigers with the ball, less than 13 to play. Harris on the baseline, Porter to the block, puts it up, Hierarchy shot, jammed down by Jeremiah.
Mr. Tillman is on the scene, and the Tigers back within a point.
Here's Josie, got the first down, breaks free, midfield, foot race for the end zone, 20, 10, hello, touchdown.
You're listening to the Mizzou Brawl Podcast.
Brennan out of the shotgun, 20 seconds to play. Takes the snap, move in the pocket, right being chased, throws it underneath, incomplete! Start drinking it, folks! Start drinking!
Here are your hosts, Nate Sanchez and Chris George.
Welcome to the first episode of the Mizzou Brawl Podcast. My name is Nate Sanchez. With me is my co-host, Chris George. How are you doing today, Chris?
Doing great.
So we're going to bring you the first edition of this podcast. Brawl Network is starting to expand into the college sports landscape, and I believe we started an Alabama Brawl, and here we are with a Mizzou Brawl. I am a sophomore at the University of Missouri, as is my co-host, Chris. And it's an exciting time to be on campus. Lot of great things going on in the Mizzou sports world. Most of all, the basketball team. Big game last night. Missouri with a 2-point victory over Florida. The Drew Smith buzzer-beating layup coming around the baseline, contested by 3 different Gators players. Just an unbelievable finish, and another just fantastic night for Drew Smith, who I would argue is Mizzou's most important player. What were your thoughts on that Drew Smith shot last night?
I mean, he's by far the player that you want to have the ball in his hands on the last shot. I mean, coming off the inbound play, I think Henson might have inbounded or he caught the inbound, and I was a little skeptical because, whenever he drives, he's a little loose. So I wanted the ball to get to Drew. And I saw it got to Drew. I had way more confidence. And especially with his high percentage shots when he's finishing in the paint, I knew that what he was looking for. He wasn't looking to hit a 3 to win the game. He was looking to get to the basket, and that's exactly what he did.
Yeah, and the biggest thing for me was, I don't know if you remember in the second Ole Miss game when Mizzou was down 2 or 3. It was either 2, 3, or 4, and it went around a bunch on Twitter and on Mizzou Twitter. And basically, they inbounded it and they dribbled out the shot clock, and then they passed it off to. It was a very, very important possession in crunch time against Ole Miss, and they passed it off to Drew Smith with a few seconds left on the shot clock, and just dribbled out the shot clock and didn't get a good look at all. This one was just a great look where they came out of the timeout, they knew what they were going to do, and Drew Smith just took it right to the hole, and he won the game for Mizzou, and it was a hugely important win for Mizzou, who had lost 3 of 4, had gone from ranked number 12 in the country to unranked in a matter of a couple weeks, and that was a great showing from Mizzou, who desperately needed a very good outing. And while it wasn't pretty, there's still they still have their issues trying to close out games. I don't know what it is. I don't know why it is, but a second half lead with Mizzou, just no matter how big it is not safe. We saw that certainly in the Alabama game, and we've just been seeing it throughout the season. And Mizzou had a 10-point lead at one point pretty early in the second half, and they let Florida come back and tie the game as Florida went on an 8-0 run to tie the game late. And thankfully for Drew Smith's heroics, Mizzou was able to get out of there with a win. But yeah, I do think that this is a pretty impactful win just in terms of confidence in getting your team right before they head to the tournament, because we were talking before we started recording, that was their 7th Quad 1 win, and they needed it in a bad way. So obviously, do you agree that the biggest thing about last night was just confidence and getting back in the win column?
Yeah, I think one main thing I took away was coaching. So if you look at the Bama game, and I think it was the Georgia game when we were up, Bama, we were up like 22 with 9 minutes. Georgia, we were up 16 with 12 minutes, whatever it may be, or whatever it was. And Georgia went on an 8-0 run. Konzo never called timeout, and they ended up going up by 6. Alabama kept going on runs, never called timeout, tied the game. Last night, which I was actually looking out for specifically, is Konzo called timeouts in the right time. So we got up by 10. They brought it back to even, called timeout, regrouped, got another 8-point lead, I believe, with I think it was around 2.5, 3 minutes when Mitchell Smith hit the 3. Then they went on that 6-0 run in the last, I want to say, minute 50 or so to bring it back to 2. Konzo calls another timeout to regroup. Great timeouts called last night, especially on that last play, that final draw. It's just little things like that I noticed. They play with much more urgency that game compared to the Ole Miss road game where they just look stagnant. Same with the Ole Miss home game, and just kind of it sucks because we should be like, what's our record? 15-7.
15-7. They're only 8-7 in conference play.
18-4 right now. If you beat Ole Miss at home, don't give up the lead against Georgia.
The Mississippi State game was a pretty big collapse too. That was one of the more unreal collapses I'd seen in some time.
Yeah, what was that game? We got outscored by 27 in the second half.
Yeah. And I'll be interested to see how that narrative carries over into the postseason in Nashville in the SEC tournament, and then Indianapolis in the NCAA tournament, because you got to close games, especially against good teams, and obviously you're going to be running into good teams down the stretch in Nashville and in Indianapolis. But yeah, the biggest thing for me has been last night, Mizzou got production all across the board. They had 5 players in double digits. Tillman, Pinson, Drew Smith, Mark Smith, Mark Smith has come on a lot more these past few games. I think it was the Arkansas game, he was taken out of the starting line. One of the games fairly recently, he was taken out of the starting lineup and came off the bench for one game, and he's been great ever since. He's still struggling a bit from 3, but it has improved greatly. He went through a 5 or 6 game stretch where he couldn't buy a bucket, but now he's been much better. He had 11 points last night. He's been much better on the defensive end, much more engaged. But one of the heroes from last night, you mentioned him earlier, was Mitchell Smith with 14 points off the bench, hit 2 threes, including that massive 3 at the end of the game last night. If they're able to get some production from their bench, which has been a problem all year, the sky's the limit for Mizzou, because you look at what they bring to the table. Your point guards, your backcourt is Drew Smith and Xavier Pinson. They're running the show. Those are your 2 guards, and then Mark Smith and Kobe Brown on the wings with Tillman in the middle. But then you look at the bench, and you haven't really had any consistent production off the bench all year. Mitchell Smith has been the backup big, and he played a lot when Tillman was out. But besides Mitchell Smith, and the other thing about Mitchell Smith is he's not going to be providing that scoring punch off the bench. He's your backup big that provides energy and defense. He can shoot a little bit, but his main thing is defense. And his 14 points off the bench last night were huge. But he's been very quiet recently. Javon Pickett, they're going to need some more punch off the bench if they're going to make a run in Nashville and in Indianapolis, because yes, they have a very strong starting lineup, but a lot of these teams that you see that are going to be around in March go pretty deep, and Drew Buggs has been they love him. He's Coach Buggs, but they don't really. He doesn't provide, that punch that you need off the bench. So who do you think Mizzou will be able to look to when in tournament time to come off the bench? Do you think they're too reliant on their starters? Because last night, besides Mitchell Smith, there was only 2 other bench points. The rest came from the starting lineup.
Yeah, it varies game to game. I saw a stat, I think Mizzou is, I want to say like 12-1 or 12-2 or something when Javon's in double digits. So it's guys like him who's young but good. He has the experience and he has the talent to be able to put up 8 to 12 points a game. And it's just little stuff like that we need to happen. We need Drew Buggs. I think I like how he looks for the pass first. I think more recently he's been looking to score more, which is what we need coming off the bench. But yeah, coming down to March in Indy, if you want to be successful, I say it's every year. You have to have experience to be successful against the NCAA tournament. You look at Michigan State from 2 years ago when they beat Duke. I mean, experience outweighs the talent there. You look at teams like Virginia who won it with Kyle Guy, experience. Mizzou has the experience and they have the leadership. It's just whether or not they're going to be able to play up to their talent, which they usually do. They play up to the talent whenever they play good teams, and they also play down. So I think for them to be successful in that first game, if we can get hopefully a top 7 seed, if we can win on Saturday, if they can play up to their level in that first round and beat another I don't want to say mediocre, like a good Power 5 conference team, but obviously not a top 25 team, then I think they have a legitimate chance of making a deep run because of that experience on their roster.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've said this from the beginning of the season when, Mizzou returned, I want to say 88% of their scoring from last year. And they weren't anything to write home about last year. Their season was pretty derailed by injuries. But that being said, they still returned most of their production. I'm pretty sure it was most in the SEC, and it was tops in the country. It was close to the top, if not the most in the country. But yeah, they're gonna need that experience to kick in tournament time. And I think the biggest X factor for them, and obviously not trying to make a cheesy pun here, is Xavier Pinson, because he's been such a roller coaster this year. I mean, you look at his game logs and it's up and down. It's a 20-point night followed up by a 6-point night. He's been really up and down. I feel like Mizzou kind of goes as he goes, because I would say that Drew Smith is probably their most important player because he just does so much for the team. But Pinson is the X factor, and that goes even without mentioning Tillman, because, I mean, obviously Tillman he won't win the award, but he should absolutely be in the SEC Player of the Year conversation. But Pinson is the biggest X factor for Mizzou, because if they have another scorer like him, and when he gets hot, we've seen him go nuclear. He had 36 against TCU, 27 against Tennessee, 23 against Arkansas, the game that Arkansas beat Mizzou in overtime. I mean, when Pinson's hot, he's one of the best guards in college basketball, but he's just been so up and down. And he has a lot of those head-scratcher games. And Kwanzaa has called him out for it in the media when he said, he wasn't attacking tonight. He needs to be better. I mean, Ole Miss, was a weird night. Both Ole Miss games were just weird for Pinson. And, basketball is a lot about matchups, obviously, and maybe Ole Miss is just a bad matchup for Mizzou. But they're going to need consistency from Xavier Pinson. And last night, coming off a 2-point outing against Ole Miss, last night was a great first step for Pinson, because he came out and had 14 points, 4 of 7 from 3. I mean, he's been Mizzou's probably their most consistent 3-point shooter this year, as up and down as he's been. We've talked a lot about Drew Smith, but I think Pinson is the X factor to Mizzou's ceiling and how far they can go in the tournament.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I'll look at the stats right now. That first Ole Miss game, they got killed by 21. Pinson, 6 points, 2 assists, no boards in 24 minutes, and they lose by 21. And when you see him drop 36 against TCU, there's a win. And going back to, I think it was like the last 7 games of last year's when he turned it on. We beat Auburn at home when they were number 12. He had 28. We beat Arkansas at home in overtime last year. He had high 20s. I forgot the exact number. But yeah, I think Pinson is the X factor. If he plays well and is able to limit his turnovers, get high quality shots, and be on the floor for 28 plus minutes, then I think we have a good chance of winning. And with him and Tillman are such a dynamic duo, because you have the speed of Pinson that you can't sag off on him when he's up top. He can shoot. He has the ability to make 3, so you can't sag off. And if you press up, he has the speed to get around you. We've seen it countless times this year, a little pick and roll, alley-oop, Pinson to Tillman. And I think that's one of their most effective offensive plays.
Yeah, absolutely. And, Pinson is, you mentioned it. He's just fantastic in the pick and roll with Tillman. And there has been countless highlights this season of them doing so. And I think Pinson, if he's hot, the sky's the limit for this team in the tournament because, like we said, he can go nuclear. And you don't even need him to go nuclear for them to win, though, because you look at the lineup and Drew Smith carries the bulk of the load, like offensively and defense. He played 38 minutes last night against Florida. And he rarely comes off the floor. And I think that makes Pinson's job easier. I think Pinson is able to, not rely on Drew Smith, but, it makes life on him easier. And the tandem of Smith and Pinson has proven to be one of the best backcourts in the country. And all of this is a great segue into, you're talking about the importance of the Florida game. Well, we can segue into the LSU game that we're going to preview that's on Saturday. I would argue that this game is even more important, mainly because, SEC tournament seeding is part of it. But, Mizzou was, I don't want to say rock bottom going into this week, but after being ranked for, I think it was 13 or 14 straight weeks, and now they're sitting outside of the top 25, confidence was low, obviously. They'd lost 3 of 4 to teams that they just should have beaten. And here they are. And then I almost feel like the A&M game getting canceled was just the cherry on top because, they dealt with A&M pretty well when they played in College Station. That would have been a really good confidence-boosting game for them heading into, this week with 2 pretty tough games because Florida, obviously, they had to scrap and claw to win that game. And now you've got an LSU team that, it's going to be a dogfight. And this is a rescheduled game. I forget who Mizzou is supposed to play today initially. But this LSU game was scheduled for back in early February, I want to say. And so, LSU is a very good team. They're gonna be aggressive. They're going to, they're gonna make things tough. And LSU has struggled defensively. And I think this is an interesting matchup for Mizzou because, you look at LSU's lineup, they have talent up and down. They do have Shaquille O'Neal's son. He isn't their best player by any means, but Cameron Thomas he's probably going to win newcomer of the year in the SEC. He's averaging over 22 points a game. He's been one of the best scorers in college basketball. I'm interested to see how Kwanzaa game plans for Cameron Thomas because obviously he's been killing teams all year long. So, the importance of the LSU game can't be understated, and Kwanzaa obviously is going to need a plan for Cameron Thomas.
Yeah, when you have Cameron Thomas averaging 22.8, you got Javonte Smart averaging 16. It's going to come down to the backcourts, the guard play. Which guard's going to be able to maintain the ball, keep the ball, not limit or be able to limit turnovers and get high percentage looks. LSU is one of those teams. I don't even know if they've been ranked this year. They've always been hovering around it, but they're not a team to mess around with. They got size down low. They got quickness up top. And they are a really good basketball team. And they're one of those teams that they're a scary 8 or 9 seed when you see in that tournament. So watch out right now because I do feel like if LSU is that 8 or 9 seed gets a win, that 1 seed should be scared of LSU.
Yeah, absolutely. And LSU honestly had a little bit of, they had some similarities to how Mizzou was trending. They were trending extremely well. They'd won 3 straight. They blew the doors off of Auburn. They blew the doors off of Tennessee. And then I think they had just entered the top 25 this past week, and they followed it up with an 0-2. Georgia destroyed them from the jump, and they lost on the road to a good Arkansas team. Arkansas is clearly they're going to be in the tournament. They're going to be a 5, 6, 7-ish seed. That's by no means a bad loss, but nonetheless, they fell out of the top 25, and they were kind of in a similar spot to Mizzou. They had a much easier game on Tuesday against Vanderbilt, but they were in a bit of a similar spot in that they were starting to fly high and then hit a rough patch, and they needed a bounce back spot on Tuesday. And both teams got bounce back wins in much different fashions, mind you, but it's certainly an interesting clash for the SEC standings. And on top of that, Mizzou needs to win in order to improve the seeding. I want to say the highest Mizzou can get is the 5 seed, so Mizzou can't get the double bye, but they would be able to jump Tennessee with a win, and that would be huge, obviously. And LSU, they're kind of in a similar, like I said earlier, they're in a similar spot as Mizzou. They're trying to right the ship. They're kind of sitting on that 8-9 seed line. I believe Lenardi's latest projection had Mizzou as an 8 seed. And both teams can get a pretty important win on Saturday. I mean, in terms of seeding, a road win at Mizzou would be massive for LSU's seeding, and a win against LSU would just add another quad 1 win to Mizzou's resume. So, I mean, the importance of Saturday can't be understated.
Yeah, if Mizzou wins Saturday, I mean, what a week that'd be. 3 quad 1 wins. You'll most likely, I would think, jump back into the top 25, hopefully before tournament play or championship week starts. And I saw if we win on Saturday, we get 5. If we lose, we get the 7. And I know the 7 right now would be playing Georgia, I believe, which didn't go well the first time. And also didn't go well when we played them in the first round. We had the Porters. And then if we win, we get the 5 seed. And I want to say that's against the winner of A&M and Vandy.
Yeah.
And I know. So if we get the 7 seed and win, we go on to Arkansas. And if we get the 5 seed and win, we go on to Florida, I believe. Which, I mean, both teams I don't want to play. Arkansas is red hot. I think 9 or 10 SEC straight wins.
Yeah.
But it's March. Anything can happen. Mizzou could win by 20 on Saturday, or they could lose by 20 on Saturday. It's just how.
Yeah. And what makes me feel better almost is the fact that Mizzou plays up and down to its competition. I mean, it's March, and the heat has officially been turned up. Last night, I mean, going forward, they don't have any, I don't want to say pushovers, but they don't have any, games where you look at it like, oh, they should win that game. It's all tough from here forward. I mean, starting with Florida last night, LSU on Saturday, the SEC tournament, obviously, and then you go into Indianapolis. So obviously they have, it's crunch time, and it's here, and you wish that they were playing a little bit better ball going into this. You wish they were kind of because I feel like they peaked at Alabama when they beat Alabama, and you wish they were playing a little bit better now, but they aren't, and that's fine. They rebounded with a great win against Florida on the road. Very tough place to win, regardless of crowd or no crowd. It's crucial to win this game against LSU, because obviously beating LSU would give you a much better seed in the tournament, and thus a much better chance to make a run at the SEC tournament. And if you were sitting at the 7-8 line for the tournament seeding this week. If you're able to beat Florida and LSU, and you're able to make a run in maybe not even win the SEC tournament, make a run to the semifinals or the championship, and you look good doing it. I mean, you could find Mizzou back on that 5 or 6 line, which would be ideal, because 8 or 9 line would be a nightmare, considering obviously you want to win the first game. You don't want to look ahead, but you do not want to be paired with the 1 seed, especially with as strong as the 1 seeds appear to be this year. I mean, Gonzaga, I don't know who's going to beat them. Baylor, I mean, I was going to say they look unbeatable, but KU made quick work of them. But either way, Baylor is still a fantastic team that I want no part of. Michigan as well. They looked beatable against Illinois, and Illinois has never looked better. I mean, they blew Michigan's doors off without Dosunmu. So the top end, where Mizzou has a chance to make a tournament run, is if they can avoid that top end. If they can avoid the 1 seeds, that's why I liked, kind of being on the 6 seed line, 7 seed, somewhere in there, where you're able to avoid the 1 seeds for as much as possible, because college basketball this year, tell me if I'm wrong, has been so much about, you have your cream of the crop that's just beating up on everybody, your top 4 or 5 teams. And then after that, it's just been everyone beating each other up. I mean, the SEC is kind of a microcosm of that, where it was just Alabama, and then everyone below Alabama was just beating each other up. For a while, Ole Miss was ahead of Mizzou in the standings, and Ole Miss is not going to be a tournament team. So, Mizzou's chance to make a run, tell me if I'm wrong, is to, kind of be in that middle area. And, I think that they need to be able to avoid that 8-9 line. And they obviously will be able to do that if they're able to win a couple games in the SEC tournament and beat LSU, pair that with a win against Florida yesterday.
Yeah, I've said this from, I think, after they beat what team was it they beat that I said this? I think it was Illinois. After they beat Illinois. Or no, it was after they beat Tennessee at Tennessee. Because obviously we have the capabilities of beating anyone in the SEC because we've done it. But I've said this from the very beginning of the season. I think there's only 3 teams Mizzou will never beat, and that's Gonzaga, Baylor, and Michigan. Like you said, you have to avoid those 3 teams for as long as possible, because we've seen cracks in the ice almost in every other team. Iowa lost to Indiana twice this year. We know that they do have that capability. We see teams like –
I think Mizzou would match up very well with Iowa just on that point, because Tillman with Garza and Mizzou's guard play. But, yeah, go on.
Obviously you want to try to avoid hopefully the top 10 at least until you get to the Sweet 16. But I could see us beating Iowa, West Virginia, Ohio State, Houston, Villanova. I could see us beating all those teams.
Especially Villanova with Gillespie. Gillespie tore his knee up last night, and now Villanova's best player is done. So that's another team that is going to be in that, that middle that you want to be mixing it up with.
And there's also one more team that I think, I don't know if we could beat, and that's Oklahoma State.
Yeah.
I've watched so much Oklahoma State basketball this year, and Cade Cunningham is unreal.
Yeah.
They are going to be a scary 5 or 6 seed.
Yeah. Oklahoma State is absolutely going to be a popular pick come tournament time to make a run, just because, I don't know how on board I am with that, just because experience always matters. And I feel like the teams that are relying on a freshman, sometimes they get exposed a little bit in the tournament. But I do think Cade Cunningham could be different. I would want no part of Oklahoma State because – obviously one player can just backpack and win a game, and Cade Cunningham is capable of that. I saw it in his 40-point performance against Oklahoma. But yeah, those are certainly some, middle teams that Mizzou is able to beat, and you want to be able to get up into that. And that's why this has been kind of a bummer that they fell from, because remember that the committee put out their top 4 seeds to see where things stood. And the first one, Mizzou was a number 4 seed, and that was the day they lost to Arkansas without Tillman. And it's been downhill since then. And that's why the Florida game was so important to get back on track. And I think that they'll be able to push, 4 seeds probably out of reach. But if they win the SEC tournament, then 4 seed, you're probably back in play there. But obviously you don't want to rely on that. So, if a strong finish to the season, I think will put them back near the 5-6 line, which is good with me because that keeps you away from the big boys as much as possible.
Yeah, Mizzou has the capabilities to win out. And if they do win out, that would be 19-7 on the year, something like that, 20-7, 100%. I think they'd get at least a 4, depending on what other teams do. But yeah, I would rather be an 11 seed than an 8 seed. I would much rather. I don't want to be a 7, 8, 9, or 10. I know that's what we're looking at right now, but that's what I don't want to be. I don't want to go up against a 1 or 2 in that second round, because once you break that barrier of the 1s and 2s, I feel like almost any team is beatable just with the certain here.
And that's kind of been the theme of college basketball this year, with upsets left and right. I don't know if I've ever seen so much, shuffling of the rankings constantly. But yeah, you want to get into the tournament, obviously. Every team wants to get into the tournament. Well, do you want to get in on the action? Thanks to our partnership with DraftKings, new users can play free fantasy sports with a first-time deposit. Here's how it works. Create your new DraftKings daily fantasy sports account. Play free fantasy sports with your first-time deposit. Compete against others and rack up points as you compete for first place. Enter now. This offer won't be around forever. Just go to dkng.com/brawl to get these awards. That's dkng.co/brawl. Act quickly. This won't be around forever. Minimum $5 deposit. Eligibility restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com for details. So thank you again to our sponsors over at DraftKings. But yeah, with that said, that's a great we can segue over into some happenings in Mizzou football, because obviously tons to talk about on the basketball front. And, they'll give us plenty more content as we head into Nashville and Indianapolis and wrapping up the season with LSU on Saturday. But football, pretty big news the other day with Sam Horn's commitment to Mizzou, 4-star quarterback from Georgia. Not typical. And again, I'm not going to act like I've been into Missouri for a long time, because the reality is I'm born and raised in Dallas. No one in my family went to Mizzou. I'm a little bit newer to the scene out here, and obviously follow it extremely closely now that I go here. But, Sam Horn does not seem like the type of guy that goes to Mizzou normally. And I think that's the first there has been other big ones, but this is like a really big power move from Drinkwitz on the recruiting scene, because he's clearly making a massive difference on the recruiting front, a difference that, Barry Odom couldn't really make.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in St. Louis, and both my brothers went to Mizzou, so I've been surrounded by Mizzou sports my whole life. And what I'm seeing now is bringing flashbacks of what Gary Pinkel did in 2012 and 2013. I mean, I was at that A&M game, winning your in to go to the SEC championship, sold out, and it's a game changer. When you can get players like that, it starts a movement. Right when we got Drinkwitz, the number one thing I saw is we got Rakestraw. All right, then we get more players. We got, I think his name's Isaac Thompson out of SLU in St. Louis, 4-star. We just got Sam Horn, another 4-star, who's the number 2 pro-style quarterback in his class, which is extremely impressive. We haven't gotten him yet. I'm hoping we get him. 4-star running back who was committed to Tennessee, I believe, and decommitted, and tweeted at Sam Horn saying, "I want to team up too." I mean, I'm not a diehard football fan like I am basketball, but I got a pretty good understanding of what Drinkwitz is doing here. It's going to change not only the football team, but just the school itself. Yeah,
I mean, especially when you're in the SEC and you're trying to compete with the likes of Alabama, Georgia, all the Auburn, all the big dogs in the SEC, you have to be able to recruit. And what Odom was doing, unfortunately, wasn't cutting it. And Drinkwitz has already gotten to showcase, his recruiting prowess, because he's brought in some pretty impressive recruits. I don't remember the specific ranking, but the recruiting class for this past year it was his first full timer. He had all the time to recruit. He wasn't doing it on the fly as he was new to the job. This was his first full class, was one of the highest in recent Mizzou history by the scouting site rankings and whatnot. And again, you cannot compete with Georgia and Florida in the SEC East without being able to recruit. And recruiting is almost like, once you have that one breakthrough, that catches the eye of other recruits, and then they want to come play for you. And then that starts to snowball, and then you start winning. And then, I mean, winning is the big one when you really start bringing in the guys that you want. And Drinkwitz is starting to be able to do that, and I'm excited to see. And now I don't know what the immediate ceiling is, but because obviously this is a very young team with, high ceiling, and Drinkwitz is just now getting his guys in. I don't think they're going to be competing for the SEC East this year per se, but I mean, give it another year or two, and when Drinkwitz has all of his recruits and he's able to get multiple classes in and grow a couple of classes, I mean, the sky's the limit, because, the way he's recruiting, it's a way that he's getting recruits that haven't come to Missouri in a very long time. And Sam Horn was just a massive, massive get. And like I said earlier, that's not the type of recruit that Missouri usually gets. And I don't know how much you paid attention on recruiting Twitter, but in the comments of all of Sam Horn's, of his commitment posts, so his background is he grew up lifelong Tennessee Vols fan, and everyone was saying, he's going to go to Tennessee.
Didn't both his parents play sports at Tennessee? Yeah,
lifelong Vols fan. And and just deep connections to Tennessee, to where, it's kind of like, oh yeah, I'll probably go to Tennessee. And just a steal for Drinkwitz. And a lot of the comments, there was a lot of very upset Vols fans that, a lot of saltiness, and that they're typically one of the more angry and salty fan bases in the SEC. And this was just another, shot for them, because their first-year coach, they wanted Heupel to bring him in, and, that's a massive get for Mizzou, and hopefully a sign of things to come on the recruiting front.
Yeah, because, 2 years ago we saw the NCAA violations that happened on us, the postseason ban, the recruiting violations that we couldn't do or anything. And that's for a coach. That's tough to come to a school that already has that on their backs. That's tough. That's something tough to overcome, and that's exactly what Drinkwitz did and why he started Mizzou. It's a new foundation. We're getting new players, good players, and once they age, and like you said, I think in the year or two, maybe when we're seniors, they'll have a legitimate chance to go to Athens and beat Georgia, go to Gainesville and beat Florida, go to Atlanta and beat someone in the SEC West, and maybe even get into that playoff. There's so much potential. I'm so excited to see what happens, especially now that things are beginning to open up. I know Bama just came out saying they're doing full capacity next year. If Mizzou is able to go down that route, it's going to be electric to see Furrow Field jam-packed again.
Yeah, that's been the biggest thing for me that I've noticed is when I first got to campus, which was first came to Mizzou, it was the Kelly Bryant year. And, after they lost to Wyoming, that sucked a lot of energy out of the season. And, there's been kind of an attitude. And then going into this year, it's kind of like, they're going to stink this year, new coach. But Drinkwitz has been able to, energize the fan base with his recruiting, his big personality. I think the first big, oh shit moment with Drinkwitz was the video that went super viral when Rick Straw committed to Mizzou, and he ran around the offices screaming and yelling. And I think that was the first, I kind of like this guy, and then it kind of took off into the season, and it was a slow start, but then when they beat LSU, that was that was kind of a turning point. And and the impact of Drinkwitz has just been, it's hard to overstate the impact that he's had, because, he's energized the program on so many levels, to the point where, God willing, there's full capacity at football stadiums this fall. I think that first Saturday is going to be pretty damn exciting with a pretty good crowd. And the way the schedule sets up, we'll talk about that at a later football preview pod, but the way the schedule sets up, there should be a lot of excitement early in the season leading into some of their tougher games later in the year. But the biggest thing is how Drinkwitz has, energized the fan base and energized the program, because, Barry Odom is he's a true son, as they say, but what he was doing just wasn't cutting it. And Drinkwitz, the sky's the limit with Drinkwitz in the program. And when you cannot win, you cannot compete in the SEC without a top end quarterback. And I read you this tweet from before we started recording from he's one of the popular members of Mizzou Twitter, MIZ Chris 18. He has a few thousand followers. Mizzou's current quarterback room: 4-star Connor Bazelak, SEC Freshman of the Year, who counts as a freshman again. 4-star Tyler Macon, not sure he has ever lost a football game he started in. And then he's not at Mizzou yet, and hopefully nothing crazy happens and he still ends up signing with Mizzou when signing day comes. But Sam Horn, he's one of the highest ranked recruits Mizzou has ever landed at any position. So, that they have guys, and it's going to be tough because, you see a lot of the transfer portal is a massive part of college football today. And, odds are that one or two of them will end up transferring out of Mizzou and they don't get the starting job and they go start elsewhere. But that doesn't matter. You get guys in, you compete, may the best man win, and you figure out who the best quarterback is. And, you can't compete without an elite quarterback in the SEC.
Yeah, and I know I've been following along Tyler Macon's Twitter ever since he came in. He loves this school. He's saying that he's not leaving, blah, 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 whatever may happen, you never know. But I've seen I love his heart, and I've seen clips of him at practice this spring doing some stuff. And with him being really mobile, you could almost see kind of what the Saints do with Taysom Hill. If it's 3rd and 2 and they need a special play drawn up, you can bring in Tyler Macon, get some wheels at the quarterback and pick up first down. So I think hopefully maybe Drinkwitz can incorporate both of them in the offense this season and make them both work. I don't want to see a guy like him go transfer portal. You never want to see that. But yeah, when 2 years comes and you have 3 top-tier quarterbacks, there's going to be big decisions to make.
Yeah, and that, obviously it's a tough decision to make, but you know what? Damn it, that's a good problem to have. It's a very good problem to have. And, Sam Horn is just another reason to be excited about what Drinkwitz is doing for the Missouri football program.
I love he's a dual athlete. I love he plays baseball because I was looking at all the NFL quarterbacks that played college baseball, and you have Russell Wilson.
Yeah.
You have Jameis Winston, Heisman winner, national title. Tim Tebow, Heisman winner, national title. There was Kyler Murray, Heisman winner.
Drafted in the first round, for baseball and football.
Good sense.
Yeah, the baseball background certainly is massive. Obviously it's not, huge, but another big-time baseball background quarterback that we didn't mention, Patrick Mahomes. That's another name that comes to mind. But yeah, it certainly doesn't hurt, and it's time for Sam Horn to put that baseball glove down and get his helmet and focus on football because, he's clearly a special talent, and barring any craziness, he's going to be a Mizzou Tiger in a couple years, which is fantastic news. So, but yeah, that's all I got. You have any other thoughts, Chris?
MIZ. Yeah,
that's what you love to hear. So, with that, we're going to wrap up our first episode of the Mizzou Brawl podcast. I'm Nate Sanchez. My co-host is Chris George, and thank you for listening.